They expected months. We gave them days. That was the brutal, defiant motto that should have been carved above every landing ramp in the Pacific. The enemy expected conventional warfare, a slow, methodical advance, dictated by logistics and terrain. What they got was a hurricane of steel and coral, driven by men too old for war, but too skilled to lose it. October 3rd, 1942, 1:25 p.m. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. Two 4-year-old seamen second class Jedediah Bucky Vance, a truck driver from Toledo, Ohio, was hauling crushed coral across an active runway when the air raid siren wailed. Condition yellow, enemy aircraft, expected within 30 to 40 minutes. But Vance had learned that Japanese pilots didn't always follow the rules. At treetop level, 3 A-6M0 fighters screamed across the field at over 300 miles per hour. Vance sprinted for the nearest Marine machine gun emplacement at the southeast corner of the runway. He grabbed the .50 caliber weapon and opened fire. His tracers stitched across the Lead Zero's fuselage. Smoke erupted from the engine. The aircraft cartwheeled into the jungle just west of the field. Bucky Vance had just become the first Navy CB to shoot down an enemy aircraft. 13 days later, Vance was dead, killed when a Japanese bomb detonated depth charges aboard the USS McFarland, igniting 20,000 gallons of aviation fuel while he pumped gas for the very aircraft he'd been protecting. But in those 13 days, Vance and his fellow CBs of the 6th Naval Construction Battalion accomplished something the Japanese High Command considered impossible. They turned Henderson Field from a captured, bomb-damaged airstrip into a fully operational bomber base, complete with 2 runways, fuel storage, repair facilities, and ammunition dumps faster than Japan could rush reinforcements to stop them. Japan's assumption: building a forward operating base in hostile territory would take months, perhaps years. The reality: America could do it in days. The implication: the entire defensive strategy of the Japanese Empire was obsolete. This is the story of how American construction speed became the most devastating weapon of the Pacific War. On January 5th, 1942, less than 1 month after Pearl Harbor, Rear Admiral Ben Morrell received authorization to create something the United States military had never possessed: combat-trained construction battalions. The Navy called them construction battalions. The men shortened it to CBs, then to CBs. The idea emerged from tragedy on Wake Island in December 1941. 1,150 civilian construction workers from Morrison Knudsen Company found themselves trapped when war began. These men hauled ammunition, filled sandbags, and fought alongside Marines for 15 days. When Wake fell on December 23rd, Japanese troops marched the survivors to the runway in rows, facing machine guns. They were certain they would be executed. A Japanese interpreter read, "The Emperor has gracefully presented you with your lives." From somewhere in the crowd, an unknown American voice bellowed, "Well, thank the son of a bitch." Nearly 2 years later, in October 1943, Admiral Shigematsu Sakibara would order the 98 remaining Wake Island contractors machine-gunned in an anti-tank ditch. Before his execution, one escapee carved into coral rock: 98 U.S. PW, the 10th of May, 2043. Admiral Morrell understood the lesson. Under international law, civilians in combat zones faced summary execution as guerrillas. America needed militarized construction forces, armed, trained, ready to build under fire. The recruitment strategy was revolutionary. The Seabees waived the normal military age limit of 31, accepting men up to 50. Several over 60 managed to enlist. The average age of the first 60 battalions was 37 years old. These weren't fresh recruits learning to operate bulldozers. They were master electricians, steel workers, heavy equipment operators, carpenters, welders, and civil engineers pulled directly from America's construction industry. A standard naval construction battalion consisted of 32 officers and 1,073 enlisted men. Every man represented one of over 60 skilled trades, They became the highest-paid group in the United States military because journeyman rates applied. By war's end, 325,000 Seabees would serve across 4 continents and more than 300 islands. But the Pacific Theater would receive 80% of all Naval Construction Force units, because in the Pacific, construction wasn't support. Construction was the strategy. Japan's assumption construction forces would require extensive supply lines and months of preparation before beginning work. The reality, Seabees landed in the second wave of amphibious assaults, sometimes within 60 hours of the first Marines. The implication: American bases appeared before Japanese reinforcements could arrive. To understand how this shocked Japan, you must understand what Japanese military planners believed possible. Their own engineering forces consisted of division engineer regiments of 900 to 1,000 men, almost completely lacking bulldozers and heavy construction equipment. Japanese base construction proceeded, in the words of one historian, at a glacial pace compared with Americans. When Japan built Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, starting in early July 1942, they deployed nearly 3,000 workers, military personnel, and Korean conscript laborers. It took them over a month. The night of August 6th, 1942, Japanese construction troops received extra sake rations for completing the airfield ahead of schedule. 24 hours later, it belonged to the United States Marines. The battle for Henderson Field was actually 3 battles. First, the Marines captured it. Then, the Seabees built it. Then, both fought desperately to hold it. August 8th, 1942. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion arrived at Guadalcanal to find a partially completed airstrip, bomb craters, abandoned Japanese equipment, and coconut groves. 4 days later, August 12th, the first PBY patrol bomber landed on Henderson Field. On August 20th, 31 Marine F-4F Wildcats and SBD Dauntless dive bombers flew in from the carrier USS Long Island. 13 days from capture to operational airbase, the Japanese response revealed their shock. Between August and November 1942, Japan launched 3 major ground assaults, 7 large naval battles, and continuous air attacks, all aimed at recapturing or destroying a single airfield. They failed every time. And the reason they failed reveals the genius of the Seabee system. On the night of October 13th and 14th, 1942, 2 Japanese battleships and 2 cruisers positioned themselves offshore and began methodically shelling Henderson Field. For 4 hours, 14-inch naval guns poured explosives onto the runway. One Seabee remembered, "You can get a dozen air raids a day, but they come and they're gone. A battleship can sit there for hour after hour." The next morning, there was a haze over the whole area. 5 miles of coconut groves were gone. Every tree was gone. The airfield was destroyed. Chief Machinist Mate Elijah P. Thompson died when a 14-inch shell collapsed his foxhole. He was the first Seabee killed in action. At dawn, the Japanese expected Henderson Field to be inoperable. Instead, the Seabees had already begun repairs. The secret was Marston mat interlocking steel planking sections, each 10 feet long, 15 inches wide, and 66 pounds in weight. Pre-positioned trucks loaded with crushed coral, tools, and spare matting surrounded the airfield. When shells created craters 15 to 20 feet deep and 40 feet across, Seabees raced to fill them. Some used helmets as scoops when equipment ran short. Damaged Marston mat sections were replaced using only sledgehammers. Commander Joseph P. Blunden later calculated that 100 Seabees could repair a 500-pound bomb hit in 40 minutes, including replacing the Marston mat. By mid-afternoon on October 14th, Henderson Field was operational. Japan's assumption, destroying an airfield through sustained bombardment, would deny its use for days or weeks. The reality, Seabees repaired shell and bomb holes faster than the Japanese could make them. The implication, air superiority in the Solomon Islands, would belong to whoever held Henderson Field, regardless of how much firepower Japan threw at it. In December 1942, Japan abandoned efforts to retake Guadalcanal. By February 9th, 1943, they completed their evacuation. Japanese Major General Kiyotake Kawaguchi later called Guadalcanal the graveyard of the Japanese army. Henderson Field became the template. But what came next would be even more devastating. The Central Pacific Offensive of 1944 demonstrated American construction capability on a scale Japan simply could not comprehend. January 31st, 1944. American forces seized Majuro in the Marshall Islands. The atoll was unoccupied, but the Japanese had left an incomplete 5,800 feet runway. The 100th Naval Construction Battalion arrived February 1st. By April 15th, 74 days later, Majuro boasted a fully operational airbase with a coral-surfaced runway, complete taxiways, aprons, housing, shops, piers, a 12,000-barrel fuel depot, and 21 distillation stills producing 50,000 gallons of fresh water daily. February 18, 1944. Eniwetok Atoll fell to American forces in less than 5 days of fighting. The 110th Construction Battalion arrived while combat still raged. On March 11th, 18 days after arrival, the first plane landed on the bomber strip. By April 5th, 44 days after the island's capture, permanently based bombers flew their first operational mission. Each base enabled the next advance. Tarawa provided staging for the Marshall Islands. The Marshalls supported operations against the Marianas, and the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam would become the launching platforms for the strategic bombing of Japan itself. The Marianas campaign revealed just how catastrophic American construction speed had become for Japanese defensive planning. June 15, 1944. Marines and Army troops stormed ashore at Saipan. The 121st and 18th Naval Construction Battalions landed with the assault forces. Japanese troops defended Aslito Airfield ferociously, but American forces captured it on June 18th. 5 days later, June 20th, the first P-47 Thunderbolts touched down on the repaired runway. The fall of Saipan devastated Japanese leadership. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo resigned. The Japanese public learned for the first time that the war was not going according to plan. Admiral Matomi Ugaki, whose diary provides the most comprehensive Japanese perspective on the Pacific War, wrote critically about Japan's inability to match American logistical capabilities. But Saipan was only the beginning. 9 miles away lay Tinian, and on Tinian the Seabees would build the largest airfield complex in the world. July 24th, 1944. The 4th Marine Division executed a shore-to-shore landing from Saipan to Tinian. August 1st, the island was declared secured. 9 days of fighting, and then the construction miracle began. The 6th Naval Construction Brigade arrived with 15,000 Seabees, 12 full battalions. Their mission transformed Tinian into a strategic bomber base capable of launching sustained attacks against the Japanese home islands. The numbers defy belief. Over the next 6 months, Seabees moved 11 million cubic yards of earth and coral, 3 times the volume of the Hoover Dam. They accumulated 900,000 truck miles. Equipment operated 20 hours per day. Maintenance crews worked the remaining 4 hours. They built 4 parallel runways at Northfield, each 8,500 feet long. Another 2 runways at Westfield, 13 miles of taxiways and runways in total. HARD stands for 265 B-29 superfortresses. By February 1945, Northfield was operational. By August 1945, Tinian accommodated nearly 450 B-29 seconds, the largest concentration of strategic air power in history. The base cost $100 million in 1,940 seconds. Currency: approximately $1.2 billion today. It was one of the largest earth-moving projects in the world. equivalent to constructing the Panama Canal, and it was built in hostile territory, on an island 8,000 miles from California, in less than 1 year. Japan's assumption: strategic bomber bases required years of development, secure supply lines, and massive industrial infrastructure. The reality: America built the world's largest airfield in combat conditions in 6 months. The implication: Japan would face sustained strategic bombing far earlier than their defensive planning had anticipated. From Tinian's runways, 29,000 combat sorties would fly against Japan, dropping 157,000 tons of bombs. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 named Enola Gay lifted off from a runway the Seabees had built. In its bomb bay rode the first atomic weapon ever used in warfare. 3 days later, another B-29 named Boxcar followed, carrying the second atomic bomb. Scientists assembled both weapons in a Seabee-built shed, with Seabee handymen assisting. But there was one more demonstration of Seabee capability that would prove even more dramatic: Iwo Jima. February 19, 1945. The 5th Amphibious Corps stormed ashore on Iwo Jima, a volcanic island honeycombed with caves and tunnels defended by 21,000 Japanese troops who had sworn to die in place. The 31st, 602nd, and 133rd Naval Construction Battalions landed in the second wave, less than 60 hours behind the assault Marines. They worked under continuous mortar fire, artillery bombardment, and sniper attack. Seabees unloaded bulldozers onto volcanic sand beaches while Japanese machine guns traversed overhead. February 26th, 7 days after the initial landing, the northeast-southwest runway was operational. The 133rd Naval Construction Battalion suffered 245 casualties, a 43% casualty rate, the highest of any Seabee unit in World War II. 43 men were killed, 191 wounded. Many died clearing landmines while grading roads. Others fell to sniper fire while operating bulldozers. By July 1945, Iwo Jima possessed 2 parallel B-29 runways, each 9,800 feet long. The base cost thousands of American lives to capture. Its value was debated for decades afterward, but by war's end, 2,400 B-29 bombers made emergency landings at Iwo Jima. That's approximately 27,000 aircrew members who would have died in the ocean without a runway 760 miles from Japan. The Seabees built it while people were shooting at them. On September 30th, 1943, the Japanese Imperial Conference approved a document titled Outline, to be followed in the future for guiding the war. This single meeting marked Japan's fundamental strategic shift from offense to defense, an acknowledgement that the war was lost. The document established an absolute defense line running from the Caroline Islands to western New Guinea. All positions beyond this line, including the 8th Area Army in the Solomons and eastern New Guinea, were designated for holding operations, a euphemism meaning they were written off. No more reinforcements, no more supply runs. Garrison troops outside the defensive line would fight until annihilated. Why did Japan make this decision in September 1943? The answer lies in a single sentence from the strategic planning document: recognition of the present and projected rate of advance of the increasingly strong American forces. Japan could not match American construction speed. Let's examine the comparative data. Airfield construction time. United States emergency fighter strips, operational in 9 to 20 days. Major bomber bases with full facilities in 60 to 120 days. Japan months to years for equivalent facilities. Henderson Field required over a month with nearly 3,000 workers. Most forward bases took substantially longer. Speed multiplier. The United States deployed over 100,000 bulldozers and tractors across all theaters during World War II. Japan possessed almost no heavy construction equipment. Japanese division engineer regiments of 900 to 1,000 men relied on manual labor and Korean conscript workers. One historian noted that Japanese engineering proved tragically inadequate when war came, and that construction proceeded at a glacial pace compared with Americans. Shipping capacity. A single American Liberty ship carried 10,800 deadweight tons, equivalent to 2,800 jeeps, or 440 light tanks. By 1944, the United States operated 3,500 cargo vessels and 900 high-speed tankers. An entire airfield could be transported in one Liberty ship, holding prefabricated Marston mat, Quonset huts, and pontoon systems. Japanese merchant shipping, meanwhile, was being systematically destroyed by American submarines. In 1943 alone, Japan lost 335 warships and merchant vessels. The strategic implications were devastating. American submarines conducted unrestricted warfare against Japanese supply lines. Island garrisons that Japan couldn't reinforce by sea simply starved. Historians estimate that 60% of Japanese military deaths during World War II, approximately 1.4 million men, out of 2.3 million total fatalities, were attributable to starvation, not combat. The United States possessed what General Eugene Raybould of the Army Corps of Engineers called the one factor of American strength, which our enemies consistently underestimated, the one for which they had no basis for comparison. From the Japanese perspective, American construction capability was incomprehensible. A Japanese journalist wrote in 1943, "We are totally incapable of standing apart objectively and viewing positively the emotions and thought patterns of other countries." Post-war interrogations revealed the depth of Japanese miscalculation. A senior Japanese intelligence officer praised the island-hopping strategy for its brilliance because it gained the most while losing the least. A Japanese fleet commander stated that what had pained them the most was the land-based air force stationed on forward islands, air forces that could only operate because of rapid base construction. Japan's assumption interior defensive lines would allow rapid concentration of forces at threatened points. The reality, by the time Japan identified an American target and moved forces, the base was operational, with air cover, the implication. Japanese interior lines were worthless against an enemy who built faster than they could react. The Marianas Campaign perfectly illustrates this. One analyst noted that America's ability to plan and execute such a complex operation in the space of 90 days was indicative of the high degree of logistical and operational superiority that Allied strategists enjoyed over their Japanese counterparts at this stage of the 90 days from planning to operational strategic bomber bases within range of Tokyo. Japan's Z-Plan, Admiral Koga's defensive strategy document from August 1943, explicitly acknowledged that Japan could not match American offensive tempo. The plan called for a decisive naval engagement as Japan's last hope. When American forces captured the plan in March 1944 after Koga's plane crashed, they found a strategy based on desperation, not capability. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who understood American industrial capacity from his time as naval attaché in Washington, reportedly told colleagues that Japan could only win through negotiated peace after initial victories. After Midway and Guadalcanal, he confided to friends that he did not expect to live to see the war's end. On April 18, 1943, American P-38 fighters, operating from a CB-built airfield, intercepted and shot down Yamamoto's aircraft over Bougainville. His death devastated Japanese morale. He was considered irreplaceable, and, in a sense, he was. Yamamoto understood what his successors could not grasp. Japan was fighting an enemy that could build faster than Japan could destroy. The numbers tell the story. In the Pacific Theater alone, American Seabees constructed 111 major airstrips, 441 piers, 2,558 ammunition magazines, 700 square blocks of warehouses, hospitals with capacity for 70,000 patients, storage tanks for 100 million gallons of fuel, housing for 1.5 million men, over 300 bases on more than 300 islands. Each base extended American air and naval power hundreds of miles forward. Each base cut off more Japanese garrisons from supply. Each base brought B-29 bombers closer to Tokyo. The cumulative effect was strategic strangulation. By 1945, Japan's situation was hopeless. The home islands faced sustained firebombing from Marianas bases. The Navy had no fuel. Pilot training had collapsed due to gasoline shortages. Food production had declined 26% in the final 2 years. 8 million expatriates returned from lost colonies, overwhelming the food supply. Admiral Matomi Ugaki, commanding the 5th Air Fleet, in early 1945, recognized the war was lost. On August 15, 1945, he made his final diary entry, then flew a kamikaze mission against American ships. Meanwhile, on Tinian, B-29 bombers were being loaded with atomic weapons in a shed that Navy Seabees had built 6 months earlier. On the morning of October 27, 1943, machinist's mate, second-class Silas Tasso, drove his D-8 bulldozer, which he'd named Helen after his wife, off a landing craft onto Mono Island in the Treasury Islands. A Japanese pillbox was holding up the New Zealand 8th Brigade's advance from the beach. Tasso raised the bulldozer's blade as a shield and drove toward the enemy position in low gear while Lieutenant Charles E. Turnbull provided covering fire with his carbine. The 24-ton bulldozer crushed the pillbox under its blade, burying all 12 Japanese occupants alive. Both men received the Silver Star. Tasso became the literal poster boy for Seabee recruiting campaigns, and the image became legend. A Seabee astride his bulldozer rolling over enemy positions. The Seabee motto was Construimus, Batimus, we build, we fight. But the deeper truth was more profound. Building was fighting. Jedediah Bucky Vance died trying to protect the planes landing on a runway he helped finish. Chief Machinist Mate Elijah P. Thompson died when a Japanese 14-inch shell collapsed his foxhole during the bombardment of Henderson Field. 43 men of the 133rd Naval Construction Battalion died building runways on Iwo Jima while under continuous fire. Those runways saved 27,000 American aircrew members who made emergency landings there. The men who built Tinian's North Field never knew they were constructing the launch site for atomic weapons that would end the war. They only knew they had to move 11 million cubic yards of earth and coral faster than Japan could stop them. In the end, American construction speed defeated Japanese defensive strategy more decisively than any single battle. Japan's assumptions about how long base construction required assumptions based on their own capabilities were obsolete before the war began. The reality was bulldozers operating 20 hours a day, prefabricated Marston mat arriving by the shipload, Quonset huts erected in a day, pontoon piers assembled overnight, fighter strips operational in 9 days, bomber bases in 60 days, the world's largest airfield in 6 months. The implication was strategic collapse. Japan's extended defensive perimeter became a noose. Every bypassed garrison starved. Every new American base extended the range of the next attack. The cumulative effect was irreversible. Admiral Chester Nimitz said it best, "These are the memories of jobs well done, of bases built, and of difficult tasks completed in the face of great hardships. Each one of these jobs meant a stride on the road to victory." Admiral Ernest King called Seabee ingenuity and fortitude, a legend in the naval service. General Douglas MacArthur said the only problem he had with the Seabees was that he didn't have enough of them. And General Eugene Raybould of the Army Corps of Engineers observed, "By the war's end, it was evident that American construction capacity was the one factor of American strength which our enemies consistently underestimated, the one for which they had no basis for comparison. They had seen nothing like it." Japan assumed building took months. America built in days, and that difference decided the Pacific War.